Hi, I'm John from Gentleman of Whiskey, and this is the 5 whiskeys I would overpay for. So the idea of valuation is one that is hotly contested in the whiskey world. Plenty of examples of this in the bourbon world, but it is not limited to that. There are tons of scotches, Taiwanese whiskeys, bourbons, ryes, all kinds of things that are overpriced in uncontrolled stores. I live in Pennsylvania, that's a controlled state. The state literally sets the price for all of the whiskey, and actually they are the only ones to sell it. That is not true in all controlled states. Ohio is one where the state controls the prices, but there are individual sellers. That's kind of the best case scenario. Honestly, a lot of people who live in Ohio are super happy about it. That's not how Pennsylvania is, but in places that are not controlled by that, prices tend to vary. Also, there is a thing called the secondary market, which is basically the black market. It is illegal to buy and sell whiskey or any other liquor. People do it anyway because they know that they can make money that way. It's just like any other industry. There is a black market for a lot of things, and whiskey is no exception. The bourbon boom has had quite a few casualties of price inflation, and there's a couple of different ways that happens. So there's the secondary market. People are buying whiskey at lower prices and selling it for higher prices. Basically, it's bourbon futures. There are stores that are getting whiskey and then upcharging it in states that are not controlled. So they're charging $500 for JD12, $150 for Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, all kinds of that stuff going on. Also, there's distilleries who say they want their piece of the profits as well, and they raise their prices to go more along with the secondary market. There's a couple of great examples of that. Wild Turkey seems to be doing that right now with especially their Master's Keep collection and the single rickhouse. A lot of people want to make money. The secondary market is ultimately what is to blame. So as we talk about the topic of value, there is going to be a bunch of people here who say that they only pay MSRP for whiskey, nothing more, and wear it like a badge of honor. I'm not sitting here telling you how to spend your money, but every whiskey enthusiast is at some point in their whiskey journey going to have to make the decision whether or not they want to pay more than MSRP or even sometimes MSRP at an inflated rate for a whiskey that is possibly not worth that. I have gotten into quite a few arguments about what whiskey value is with my friends. I do firmly believe that paying anything over MSRP is overpaying, but I also believe that there are companies out there who are setting their prices at absolutely unhinged, out of market, out of context prices, and I do believe that is also overpaying. So therein lies the decision, what is a whiskey worth to me? I'll be the first to admit that I've overpaid for whiskey, but I will also say that I have gotten to try whiskeys by either myself or somebody that I know overpaying for that whiskey, and those whiskeys are some of the ones that I consider to be my favorites. So it is kind of a double-edged sword. If you only ever pay MSRP or you only ever try things at what you think is a fair value, that's kind of where FOMO comes in. We all wish that we could just snap our fingers and the secondary market could go away and whiskey would be cheap and plentiful again, but that's just not where we are. Those days may be gone, but I think we're trending in the right direction. I think prices are sinking and stocks are growing, and we may again see a day where the secondary market is diminished. I think there's a lot of great conversations to be had with whiskey pricing, and I'd love to hear your take in the comments. So where do you think the industry is? What would you pay for the whiskeys I'm about to talk about? And what whiskeys are you willing to overpay for? So I've got a list of 5 whiskeys that I'm willing to overpay for, and let's cut the chit chat and let's get at that. So coming in at number 5, I've got Michter's Barrel Strength Rye. So this is actually a whiskey that I got for MSRP. This made the list basically because I think the MSRP for this is a little high. At $100, or actually I think it's closer to $130 now. I bought this one for $100. It is above where I feel like other bottles in the market are. So I'm talking like Hughes Brothers has a Belle of Bedford Extra Age that's 10-year MGP rye. It's fantastic. It is about $100. Then there's Sagamore's 8-year cask strength that is about $80, something like that. Those are comparable bottles with actual age statements. There's no age statement on this that are in the conversation as competitors for this, and this is more expensive than both of those. I kind of feel that way about Michter's in general. I think a lot of Michter's stuff is a little bit overpriced for the surrounding market. That being said, this bottle is fantastic. It's extremely tasty, and I do say that about the Belle of Bedford Extra Aged and the Sagamore 8-year, but this is kind of a different experience. It's not overall rye-like. It's kind of in that intermix area between a bourbon and a rye flavor profile wise. I would probably pay $100 to $150 for another one if the budget allows, but I definitely would not go as high as $300 where I'm seeing it on some websites. So that's number 5. Number 4 is not an actual bottle. It is kind of a category. If I'm not specifically talking about this Blue Note, it is any store pick or blend from an influencer or a store that you trust. Most of the time, store picks are more expensive than the off-the-shelf counterparts, and I've heard a lot of people ask why I should pay more for a bottle that is picked by somebody who is not necessarily an expert over the master distiller. And there's a really simple answer for that. I have not yet heard of a company that is offering up single barrels that are not hand-selected by the master distiller or the master taster. Somebody in that organization is earmarking these barrels, and that is what these people, whether it be stores or influencers, are picking from. So you're really picking something that has not only the distillery's brand of approval, but also your favorite store or content creator. As a content creator myself who is not currently making any money out of this, I'm completely okay with giving a few extra dollars to somebody who I enjoy watching their content. There is always a limit to that though. Sometimes there are store picks, you'll see an Eagle Rare or a Buffalo Trace, or, even a Russell's pick that has a crazy price to it, $90 to $100 picks. And there's absolutely a limit for what I will pay for something. I'm not going to sweat $10, but there is definitely a limit. So that was number 4. Number 3 is something that I actually currently don't have a bottle of. You will see it right here, right now, and that is Octomore. So Octomore is something that I've been chasing for a while. I kind of included it in this list as an example to people who think this is only a bourbon problem. This is not only a bourbon problem. Octomore is one that people have been chasing for years. I have not even honestly gotten to try one. I have never even seen one on the shelf. They are currently going in well above MSRP. You see people routinely taking pictures of Octomore bottles that are going for $500, $600. I love most of what Bruichladdich is making. I probably butchered that. I'm not great at Scotch names. Port Charlotte 10 is probably my favorite available Islay Scotch. It's kind of in that entry-level tier, about $50, $60, something like that. I would love to try Octomore. It's that Port Charlotte Bruichladdich flavor profile, so that's not going to be for everybody, but for me, that's something that I am interested in. I absolutely would love to own a bottle. I would possibly pay up to like $350 to own a bottle. Probably split it with my friend Nate because we've been looking for that forever. $350-ish is what I would pay, but you routinely see it going for more than that. Number 2. This one is going to surprise absolutely no one who has watched this channel for any amount of time. Stag is consistently one of my favorite bourbons. It is also pretty much one of the poster children for taterism. Pretty much year in and year out, the batches of Stag are solid at worst and fantastic at best. And the MSRP of this is really what's, I think, enticing taters, because if you can get it for $65 and flip it for $300, that's a no-brainer to most people. I personally like them enough that I will drink them. I mean, I don't have an unopened Stag in my collection currently. But you can routinely see these on secondary sites for $250 to $300, somewhere in there. In cases of batch 12, you can see it $350 or more. And you can see it if it's in a bottle museum store for $500 plus. I'm personally willing to pay something in the $100 to $200 range, somewhere in there if budget allows. And the reason why is actually craft whiskey. 13th Colony Double Oaked was one of my favorite releases of 2023. I really loved it. It is a craft whiskey. It is almost positively sourced. They're not very transparent about that. It is double oaked. Rumor is it's around 10 years old. It's a whiskey that a lot of people, myself included, in 2023 absolutely loved. And nobody batted an eye paying $200 for that, at least nobody who actually enjoyed it. There are plenty of people who detracted from it and are worried about the sourcing of that. A little bit of transparency would be nice, but it is definitely something that is not the norm in the whiskey industry. So that being said, 13th Colony is a Stag competitor. So if I'm willing to pay $200 for that, and the Stags are almost always good. There are definitely people who don't like it, but in my opinion, it's as close to a can't miss as there is. So why would I mind paying $200 for the OG when craft does it and no one bats an eye? I definitely do not always purchase Stag when I see it. I generally like to only have one of each batch. I'm not a huge bunker guy, but at MSRP I would always pick it up, and there's always going to be a consideration in that $100 to $200 price range. So that is number 2. And I'll bet you're wondering, if Stag was 2, what is number 1? And number 1 is actually a whole line of whiskey like the Stag is, and that is Parker's Heritage. So up until mid last year, I'd not owned any Parkers, and I'd only tried the Orange Curacao, which if you come across it, definitely don't overpay for it until you've at least tried it. It is different at best. But then I got to try 2022's double-barreled blend, and it was fantastic. It is a great bottle. It is one that I would love to own, and I've honestly considered dropping $500 on it, but budget just doesn't allow, and plus $500 is a crazy amount of money for any whiskey. I would maybe consider buying B-Tech at that price, but there's pretty much nothing else. Parker's is one of the OG tatered bottles, even if people don't want to admit it. When I first got into whiskey, people were talking about the 10-year heavy char, and that was like a fantastic release. I would love to try it someday. Parker's has always been insanely sought after and rare, even on secondary. But finally last year, I managed to get my hands on this 11-year wheat whiskey, thanks to a really good whiskey friend. And I got this 10-year rye in Pennsylvania's weird drop system currently online, and I actually paid less than MSRP for it because they dropped it on Black Friday and there was a 10% discount code. So I paid MSRP for the wheat whiskey. I paid less than MSRP for the rye. I could not be happier. They are both fantastic whiskeys, and if I come across any of the other batches aside from the Orange Curacao, I would definitely consider paying above MSRP, although the MSRP for Parker's is really high. Like $185 for a base price of a whiskey is absolutely crazy to me. The 11-year wheat whiskey and this year's 10-year rye are not carrying high age statements. I think MSRP is honestly a little high for it, although I would gladly pay MSRP for most of the Parker's releases. I would maybe pay a little bit above if I found a double barreled at the right price, but it would have to be under like $250, possibly pay up to $300, depending on my budget. So those are the 5 whiskeys that I would overpay for. I would love to hear in the comments what whiskeys you would overpay for, even if that answer is none. I definitely respect those who make that choice, but I definitely wouldn't have gotten to try some of the amazing whiskeys that I've had in the last year if my friends and I stuck to that ourselves. So the hope and the dream is that one day the secondary market becomes all but obsolete again. Maybe there's just Pappies and BTAC on there. Who knows? Maybe it goes away altogether. But any industry that has shortages or limited releases sees a resale problem, whether that's shoes or GPUs, although they are not illegal to resale like whiskey is. That's going to be the nature of the beast of being a whiskey enthusiast. So if you like this content, drop us a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And we hope you'll join us in drinking like a gentleman. Cheers. Trucks are killing me today. Let me start that all over again.